Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the ARC Party. I'm really excited to bring you an episode today that is not a list of new books coming out, and it's not an interview with an author. It's a little bit different. This is a panel that I recorded, a virtual panel that I recorded for StokerCon, which took place just about a month ago. For anybody who's not aware, me and good buddy Greg Green were asked to and did manage the programming for the virtual element of StokerCon this year. So we were in charge of setting up the list of virtual panels that were going to take place and communicating with all of the people on the panels and making sure that the panels got recorded and uploaded and ready for everybody to view as part of their StokerCon experience. So part of that was contributing my own panel. This year, the panel that I contributed is called The Horror Boom on the Rise in Horror Popularity. And my goal with this panel was to take some established names in horror in the community, as well as some newer, fresher names in the community, and have a discussion about, is there currently kind of an explosion of horror, specifically in books, but also kind of, we do talk about the influence of or the kind of crossover with film. Yeah, really the goal was, you hear a lot of people saying something's happening in horror, or horror is having a moment, or we're in a golden age of horror. And it's one thing to, say that or feel that. And it's another thing to actually kind of like look at, well, what's the proof that backs that up? So that was the goal of this conversation. I was able to get some really amazing people to join me for this conversation. Ellen Datlow, who has been an anthologist for decades and is one of, if you ask me, the most influential people in horror. Becky Spratford, who, again, is just, she's the horror librarian. She's the horror maven. She wrote she edited the Why I Love Horror book of essays, including some of the most powerful names in horror today. So she contributed as well to this conversation. Jeremy Robert Johnson, who in a contemporary way, he is an author. He writes a little bit of a weirder horror. His most recent novel was 2021's The Loop, which is fantastic. But historically, he's had a lot of connections to the Bizarro community, weird fiction. He ran a publisher of his own called Swallowdown Press. So he's got a historic perspective, and he's been into the horror scene since the early 2000s. So really valuable contribution from Jeremy. And then with some newer voices, I thought it would be nice to hear from people who had not had those decades of experience. And it wasn't just, us old guard telling everybody how it is. So I invited Yaya Schofield, who recently published her debut novel, On Sunday She Picked Flowers. And I had heard her on a few podcasts, and the book is supposed to be incredible. And I just really liked her vibe. I liked her enthusiasm. I liked her perspective on contemporary horror. So I thought she would be a great contributor. And then the other person that I asked to join is George Dunn, who goes by George's Reads on social media. And he is a young British, book influencer, book reviewer. And his thing that always enamored me was that he would create really kind of granular subgenres of horror when he was doing lists and stuff on his social media. So it wouldn't just be haunted house. It would be like a really specific, thing about haunted houses, and that would be a subgenre, or something he would completely make up. So I was always just kind of charmed by his social media presence, and I thought maybe hearing from him would be beneficial for people as well. So that's the panel. That's the list of panelists, and I moderated. It was a great conversation. I think that it is safe to say that horror is experiencing something very special currently, and I hope you enjoy our conversation as we explore what might be the cause of that, and celebrate the fact that that's kind of the reality that we're living in.
I can't tell you how excited I am to do this panel, and I'm going to do the title before I forget to say it. horror boom, and then I subtitled it On the Alleged Rise in Horror Popularity. And we'll understand that a little bit more in a moment. But the first thing I want to do is I just want to introduce the panelists that we're going to be talking to today. And you were all nice enough to share your bios. So I'm going to read through them really quickly. Apologies if I misspeak or anything. But the first person I want to introduce, Ellen Datlow. See, I've been saying it the right way, but then I hear people say it a different way.
Like people are saying it the wrong way, and for like 40 years they never did, and suddenly they are. And it's like, wow, where did you get that from? So thank you for asking.
Yeah. Ellen Datlow has been editing sci-fi, fantasy, and horror short fiction for more than 4 decades. She currently acquires short stories and novellas for Reactor, Tor.com, and Nightfire. She's edited numerous anthologies for adults, young adults, and children, including the Best Horror of the Year annual series, and most recently, Night and Day, which is in the background here, a 2-part horror anthology modeled after the Ace Doubles. Forthcoming are All Hallows Eve and Lovecraft's Brood. The latter is a reprint anthology. She won multiple awards and was named recipient of the 2007 Carl Edward Wagner Award, given at the British Fantasy Convention for outstanding contribution to the genre, the Lifetime Achievement Award given by the Horror Writers Association, and the World Fantasy Life Achievement Award at the 2014 World Fantasy Convention. Good Lord. She runs the Fantastic Fiction at KGB Reading Series in New York City with Matthew Kressel, and can be found on the website datlow.com and on Twitter, Blue Sky, and Facebook. Quite the impressive resume.
It's 40 years.
Okay, the next bio I have is for George Dunn, who is a UK-based horror reader, reviewer, podcaster, and genre obsessive. Active under the handle George's Reads, George reviews horror literature for, is it Fan-Fi or Fan-Fi?
I think they're interchangeable, but yeah, I think Fan-Fi.
Fan-Fi addict, and is currently studying journalism at the University of Sheffield. George, thanks for joining us.
No worries, that was a bit shorter, wasn't it? But...
For now. All right, up next, Jeremy Robert Johnson is the author of the award-winning, critically acclaimed novels The Loop and Skullcrack City, as well as the collections Entropy in Bloom and All the Wrong Ideas. In 2008, he worked with the Mars Volta to tell the story behind their Grammy-winning album, The Bedlam in Goliath. In 2017, his short story, When Susurrus Stirs, oh my lord, if you haven't watched that, do it, was adapted for a film and won numerous awards, including the Final Frame Grand Prize and Best Short Film at the H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival. He lives in Wrights in Portland, Oregon. Jeremy, good to see you, my friend.
Very happy to be here. Thank you. Also, don't watch When Susurrus Stirs at lunch, at least. That's my one caveat. Or with other people seeing your screen, or in general. But it's amazing. I love it. Yeah.
It is gross. All right. Up next, Yaya Schofield.
Yes.
I'm really careful about doing names properly. So Yaya Schofield. Their work has been featured in a number of horror and speculative fiction magazines and anthologies, including Faya Lit Mag and Death in the Mouth Volume 1. They have also published a short story collection, Just a Little Snack. When they're not terrifying innocents, Yaya is a professional stay-at-home daughter in Atlanta with their cats, Sophie and Chihiro.
Yep. I have a Sophie
Chihiro.
I have a Sophie.
Oh, that's
not a Sophie cat.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Everyone, thank you so much for agreeing to talk about this.
Wait, what about me?
Becky?
Oh my!
That's Becky.
Are you just so used to having me on your podcast?
It's like you're always here, so I forgot. Okay, so I so apologize. Last and absolutely not least, Becky Spradford is a librarian in Illinois. She trains library staff all over the world on how to match books with readers through the local public library. She runs the critically acclaimed blog RA for All, writes reviews for Booklist, and a horror review column for Library Journal. Becky's the author of 3 textbooks for library workers and the Bram Stoker and Locus Award nominated Why I Love Horror. Award nominated?
Yeah, because the awards haven't been given out yet.
Oh, that's right. I just assumed you won that one. She's on the Shirley Jackson Award Advisory Board and is a proud member of the Horror Writers Association, currently serving as the association's secretary and co-chair of their libraries committee. Becky was named one of the Chicago Tribune's Chicagoans of the Year in 2025. You can follow Becky on Blue Sky at raforall.bsky.social. I didn't do a bio for myself, but I host a podcast called The Arc Party, and I've been podcasting forever, so that's me. All right, now I can say thank you, everybody, so much for joining me for this conversation. All right, so a little background. I was thinking about in the last few years, or in the last several years, almost probably close to a decade, I randomly hear people say, yeah, horror is really having a moment, or it's a golden age of horror, or like in the earlier years, it was more just like something's happening with horror. And so you hear people say that a lot, and it kind of just becomes like a common understanding. But then I wanted to kind of like question that, like, is that actually real, or does it just kind of feel that way? Are people just reading more in general, or what's the story? And so I thought it might be good to kind of interrogate that idea of, is there really something happening with horror? Is horror seeing some kind of rise? And if so, like, where did that come from and what's going on with that? So to kick off the conversation, the first topic I want to go into is there an actual boom in horror happening? And if you do say yes, why? And if you say no, why? So that's how we're going to kick it off. And I'm just going to go in the order of how I see people on the screen, so don't get offended if I don't pick you in the order that you'd like. But Ellen, do you have some thoughts on that?
I do. I do believe it's a boom, and I don't know why exactly, but I do also think it's cyclical. I mean, it may not last. I don't want to be negative at all, but this has happened before. There have been horror booms in the past. This one, I think, seems to be lasting longer than the earlier ones, and I'm not sure. I don't know why. I mean, I assume other people have some ideas about why it's going on, both in movies and in literature. And the thing is, once we start talking about movies, that gets subsumed. It subsumes everything else. So I prefer to just talk text. But definitely, I mean, just reading for the year's best over the last 40 years or whatever it is, 39 years, I think, I see more books coming out, more anthologies. And that to me indicates that more people are reading it. Even if some of the publishers may not last. So I think there has been something going on, certainly in the last 5 to 10 years, maybe 5 years, especially. I mean, that's part of it,
And I actually, reading for the year's best, have you noticed, like, it seems like you're saying that there's just more stuff that you have to go through. There's more to process to get through the best. Is it like a significant change?
Yes, it's really overwhelming. I mean, I've been talking to people today. In fact, I don't remember who I was talking to someone today. I don't know. Oh, I know, a friend in Wales on Zoom saying, I don't know if I can handle it anymore. I mean, it's just overwhelming. Wow. I haven't handed in my 2025 book yet. I'm still working it. And so I have to talk to my editor. I mean, I hope it comes out this year rather than next year. But yeah, I mean, it's totally overwhelming. I am seeing so many more individual story collections. They're not necessarily wonderful, but they exist. They're being published. And, a lot of them are by new writers. A lot of them by writers I've never heard of. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, Clive Barker came out of nowhere with an all-original collection. So I'm seeing a bunch of all-original collections, which for me is more work because other collections I only have one reprint, one original. I only have to read that one original and then just discuss the overall thing. So yeah, to me it's kind of overwhelming, and I don't know if it can last because of that.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, I mean, probably like one of the better problems to have as a community who loves horror, but for you, yeah, like maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how they're selling. I mean, I have no idea what the sales are for these many books coming out. But a lot of, and of course, there are the imprints from various mainstream publishers that are even now more of them. Another one just started. I can't remember what it was called. But I don't want to be the only one talking.
No, I was gonna kick it over to George. One of the reasons I invited George is that your perspective might be a little different because you're kind of a different generation. So I wanted to see what your perspective on, like, where what you think is horror going through something big right now.
Yeah, I think definitely over the past 5 years, but even more so within the last year. I mean, let's not talk about movies too much, but the Oscars sweep for horror this last year was crazy. A Pulitzer Prize won by a horror book just the other day. I definitely think so. And one of my working theories is that maybe people are crossing the aisle a bit more from other genres. Romance readers, realizing there's romance in horror. It doesn't have to be staunchly one or the other. Like Rachel Harrison, Nat Cassidy, maybe are bringing more readers in, and people are realizing that not all horror is depravity and gore necessarily.
Only the good stuff.
Wow. Yeah. I definitely think we're in a
Good stuff is.
So a broadening of perspectives, maybe, or like a realization that horror is more things than maybe it was traditionally defined as. Yeah. How about Becky? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I've talked about this a lot and have a lot of thoughts about it. I want to go back. I think we really want to look at the current moment we're in. Ellen is right, it's cyclical. And where this cycle started was with the end of the last cycle. And it was with the implosion of leisure books and that paperback horror market, especially because I'm looking from the library perspective, right? Where there is a discovery thing, right? Readers discover books that are in the library. When that imploded, it took away a lot of the horror that we were able to add to libraries. I was just starting in libraries then. It was the turn of the century, and it was horrible. It was horrible because we couldn't get the books people wanted. We could get the Stephen Kings and the Peter Straubs and the Dean Kuntzes and the Anne Rices, but there was this huge market that we lost, and people couldn't even go buy them, right? So this was a big problem. It took time for it to build back up, and it did. And I'm talking about building up to books that get into the library. So we're talking about the big five building them up and having titles. At the same time, this wonderful thing was happening, this new generation who had been in the indies. And I really talk about it with like Stephen Graham Jones being the leader of this, right? Of that movement. And what was different about that? These young people, first of all, they went to school and were taught by people who thought it was okay to teach genre. And now they're becoming teachers and teaching genre. So I really do think it's gonna keep going because of that. But because we have people like Stephen, who's, a professor at a major university teaching horror, as just one example to keep it going. But what happened was those voices were coming in. And what those voices were different. I talk about this all the time. Growing up in the 80s, Stephen King had nothing for me, a little girl. Like, there's nothing. I found my way through horror through, Flowers in the Attic, V.C. Andrews and that kind of thing. And so what we're seeing now is these other voices that are coming in behind. They're not straight white men. They're marginalized voices. They're people. And when you add a fear on top of the regular fear, when you add a fear of living in a body, living in an identity that lives in fear just because of who they are, that adds another layer of fear, and it made these stories better. So we get, Sylvia Romero Garcia, we get Gabino Iglesias, we get Stephen Graham Jones, and then we get people who build off of them after that. The explosion of queer horror is the same thing with that. And so that is why it's still going, and it's going longer, in my opinion. It's multifaceted. And here's the thing, George, you said it. It's here. It's entrenched. It's not going anywhere. So there is more, Ellen. Oh my gosh, I'm looking at the side here to my list of books I have to review this year. I was talking with my editor of Book List. She's like, why are there so many horror books? And I said, remember when there weren't any and we were struggling to cover them? I am now averaging, I do my regular number of books for Library Journal because it's set in columns, but I'm doing 1.5 books a week now on average for the year for Book List. And that's just so I can keep up. And I've helped recruit new people. We need to get those reviews into those trade journals so the libraries add them so people know about them. I don't see it stopping because these are authors that are now in the mainstream, that are hitting the bestseller list. We have a thing called Library Reads, which is a pre-pub list that librarians publish out a month in advance. The number of horror authors in their Hall of Fame is huge. So that's just my like short thoughts on it. But it's I don't think it's going anywhere. They're entrenched. No one's gonna go without Rachel Harrison anymore.
So 3 for 3 so far on yes, there's a boom. I'm wondering, Yaya, what are your thoughts?
First of all, I'm like surrounded by all these super intelligent adults. Oh my goodness. Hi. Um, Becky said a lot of what I was thinking. I do think we are in a huge horror boom. And I also did talk about this a little bit earlier on a different podcast. I think the reason we are seeing so much of this huge push towards horror is because of like the times we're in. Especially, I think when we're getting more like diverse readers, you're getting more Black readers, more queer readers, more disabled readers. It's people looking at their situation and their reality and going, wait, it's so scary to exist in my body. What if there were vampires on top of that? What if there were werewolves on top of that? What if there was like just more? Or not even like more sometimes, just like, what does it look like to examine what I'm living through in the actual like scary, terrifying horror of just like the world we're in.
Mhm.
So I think people really are seeking that catharsis because sometimes it's just nice to be like, ugh, life is so hard. Where's the chainsaw? Come on, where's Leatherface? Can we just have Hannibal for 2 seconds? I know that's how it is for me. I'm like, okay, everything's really stressful. Can we please just have somebody eating human? Can someone please? If that makes any sense at all.
Mhm.
I think it does.
I think it does, and like the fact I think you said, can we just have someone eating humans? Is that what you said?
Please,
Because-
I did. Can we please have someone eating like human brains out of a
Yeah.
skull? I was thinking. I realized the first thought was gonna be Jeffrey Dahmer, but then what I was referencing was Hannibal when he like.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's
Yes.
the whole thing. Listen, Hannibal's my entire thing. Yes.
But that illustrates a point because there was like
Thank
so much
you.
horror now
Yay.
that like you have you could make a stack of books that are contemporary, came out in the last 2 years that are cannibalism focused.
Yeah.
Like it's that there's that much. So
you
finally,
can.
Jeremy, I didn't save you for laugh for any specific reason, but one of the things I like about your perspective is that I know you from like Bizarro and some of the more kind of really sub categories that could be connected with horror. And we've seen, some of that stuff kind of crumble more recently in ways. And so I thought your perspective would be interesting because of the tendrils that you have with like indie horror specifically, but also Bizarro and things like that. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there is like this interstitial period between like the two major booms that would be the separate thing was the kind of the rise of indie publishing and the availability of print on demand, the distribution and mainstreaming and destigmatization of that work that kind of leads into the new boom. So I would just start by saying like I was a kid on my bike in the 80s for the first horror boom. Which was a magical time. It was somewhat homogenized, but I could ride my bike to the rec stall, hit the spinning paperback rack, and get King, McCammon, Lansdale, Clive Barker, Poppy Bright. It was just, it was really easy to go almost anywhere, even in a small town. My town had 8,000 people. I could ride to the rec stall, and that stuff was readily available as mass media for kids. And so I just, am grateful for that experience. And like Skip Inspector, and it started getting a little more out there towards the end of that boom. But also, like as I got older, I had the good fortune to get to meet some folks that were participating in that and talk to them about their experience. And they would casually say like, "Oh yeah, we sold over 1 million mass market paperbacks of a certain copy." So this boom feels like a boom in presence, but as far as like media competition now, like we're up against the internet. We're up against some people's favorite writers are Redditors writing like No Sleeps and SCP characters. There's just such a it's like it's a niche boom, right?
Yeah.
So it's nothing's ever going to beat that 80s boom and that kind of monoculture we existed in. And one of the things that led into that, I think, Rob, you have a really great point, is just like there was this advent of people being able to kind of get this riskier work out during a time when leisure was the main game in town. If you were doing dark fiction, there was a really small market for, print publication for horror, and for especially in the mainstream, where horror had almost become anathema, where they were just putting thriller on all the spines, and not even calling it horror for marketing, right? And so coming up in that period where we said, a lot of folks I knew said we don't fit in a specific genre, and I would include Stephen Graham Jones in that. Tremblay was doing literary and detective stuff before he kind of locked in. And, there was definitely a crew that was coming out of that space that said mainstream publishing would be nice, but in the end, we just want to have a professional copy of our book available to folks to read, and maybe they'll vibe with the weird stuff we're doing. And I think Bizarro did a lot of that. I think McAdam Cage had like a smaller pocket of that. They had mainstream reach, but they also did some riskier work, which is kind of, Jones's start, and Craig Clevenger and folks like that. And eventually there was all this huge pushback, and people were like, people were like, oh, this is the stuff that couldn't get published, right? Until enough time passed and enough good work rose, to the top, where it developed its readership. And now I think you see something like, Eric LaRocca coming out with an indie title with a phenomenal cover, hitting TikTok at just the right time, moving 30,000 copies, and now having a mainstream career. So that has been part of the lead into the secondary boom, is just people's ability to get out there and platform and get reach and find their audience, and find this broader audience that exists now too for much less homogenized voices, which is awesome. And so, it feels like we are definitely in a boom now. And the moment that marked that for me is like a long time ago, there was a story about Robert McCammon having a billboard on Hollywood Boulevard for like, not even one of his huge titles. It was like They Thirst or something, right? So not even peak McCammon. And I was like, they were putting billboards out for this stuff, That's insane to me. And then years later, they have a meeting at Saga, and they send out an email to us, and they say, for the first time in like 15 years, we're going to put horror back on the spines. And that told me that was like, okay, now they're having meetings in the Big Five offices, and they're saying horror is a real thing that matters to us financially again, which is a barometer, right? And so it was the return of horror. And then a week after that, Stephen Graham Jones had a billboard up for The Only Good Indians in Times Square. And I was like, okay. Like, this is a significant shift in how things have been moving. And I think since then, it's felt like a really compelling boom. Like, the quality's been really high. There's also, there's a glut of stuff because of internet distribution, but I've also seen some of the most fascinating and risky and compelling work I've seen in a long time.
The first 2 years we did Year's Best Fantasy and Horror for St. Martin's, which was, I think, like around 86, 87. They refused to put horror on the cover. It was actually called Year's Best Fantasy for the first 2 years, and it finally got to put horror on the cover too.
Wow.
And I know, like, this year, Jennifer McMahon, who's, been around forever, she's so excited because they're finally using the H word to promote her book. She's always wanted them to, but they now, like, it's okay to do it now. It's in the BISAC codes.
That and Jeremy, kind of like your finishing thought kind of moves into my next kind of idea, which is like, can you think of like a time where you kind of realized, like, a moment where things started to shift? So you mentioned just the fact that places would acknowledge horror, and I would say that even bookstores for a while didn't have a horror section, and now they were established, and then they got bigger, and they're getting bigger. So like, I feel like that's a thing too. But for me, there's a moment, I don't want to make this all about Stephen Graham Jones, but when Jones got Mongrels onto a Big Five, for me, that was the start of like a kind of, that was like the wheel started to turn a little bit with, like, because again, the Big Fives are paying attention, but like these people who had been crushing it in indie and small publishers and just putting out this excellent work now are Paul in 2018 was his third horror book on William Morrow. So like the momentum was starting to turn, and Jeremy, you The Loop was what, 21 or 20?
2020. Yeah, just in
2020,
time for
yeah.
the pandemic.
Yeah.
I nailed
Just in time for the
marketing
pandemic.
stuff. Yeah.
I reviewed it though.
Like-
It was great.
Yes.
But I want to even go back, Rob, because if we're looking at that, I like to say A Head Full of Ghosts by Tremblay
Okay.
started this.
Okay.
But then I look back even further. If you look back, Tananarive Due was doing things with her Immortals series and with The Good House. And if you look back, and I don't remember the exact year of The Good House, but that is a book that now looking back, if you go back and read it, you're like, this was written when? Like, you think it was written right now. It really just hits on a lot of the themes and the things we're seeing today. And that you just got to reach back a little to these shows. And those were all major publishers that were taking a chance on the more literary titles. But it was extremely important to remember it was just all inching toward that moment. And really, we're not making it all about Stephen, but The Only Good Indians is that moment. Like that. And I have a story I tell all the time, but I'll tell it here again. The year before, Cabin at the End of the World was a book, and I told everyone to read this book. This book is going to break you, but you're going to be happy you read it. And that is like that, like that is horror in a nutshell, right? And I finished reading The Only Good Indians at the end of 2019 for review. And the first thing I did when I finished it was I texted Paul Tremblay. And I said, you're not going to have the book of the year for 2020. And I don't even know what you're putting out. And he wrote me back, you read The Only Good Indians. That was his answer. Like, I know. And so I do think that it raised the bar in a way, both, and never call it literary horror, because that demeans all horror. All books are, it really means everything. All books are literary. But it changed the game to say, this is a horror novel. Like there's violence, there's killing, there are dogs getting it, there are monsters. But it changed the storytelling in a way that raised the bar for everyone else, but didn't just raise the bar. Let the people who were doing that pushing have a chance to have a way in.
Yeah. Now, it looks like we lost Yaya, so hopefully she's able to jump back in. But
I want to know George's perspective from across.
That's what I was on. It's like we're talking about our perspective. I really want to know what you think, George. Like, what's your perception of the change?
I don't have like a ton of context for this because I'd say 6 years is probably how long I've been reading horror, and even less time as kind of involved in the space as I am. I think the book that fully exploded for me that I was kind of aware of even when I wasn't so much in this space was The Troop by Nick Cutter. I think that was one of the first books where I thought, social media has done a lot for this book, which is great. And that was I think that was my first review on Instagram that I ever did. So it worked for me. I kind of had my own epiphany when I started my little subgenres series, which for anyone who doesn't know is I basically said, never mind, I'm just going to do my own. And I sat down and thought, I've not posted in a couple of days. What am I going to do? I thought folk horror, and I've done that a bit. And then I realized that there was so much folk horror that I could break down folk horror into other little micro categories. And I was kind of like, well, that just shows how broad the genre is at this point. So that's probably my snap realization that horror is massive at the minute. And that's all I got.
That's cool.
I'm finding, discovering things that were around a long time ago that were written by mainstream writers, and recognizing them as horror, I think, is really important. I only recently read Beloved by Toni Morrison, and that is amazing. If I'd known when it came out what it was, I would have read it when it came out, but I wasn't. I don't even know how it was marketed, but it's an amazing, depressing, fantastic horror ghost story. And books like that, which I think have finally been embraced by, it's breaking down our barriers too, from saying, well, we're not going to read the mainstream stuff. So it's permeating both. It's going back and forth. It's like a membrane that is bouncing back from horror, from mainstream to what we consider genre, and it's breaking the barriers. And I think that's important too. And I think the most important thing is what just happened. Daniel Krause just won the goddamn Pulitzer Prize for it's like, which I
Yet
love.
they didn't call it, the H word was not used. Yeah, he's wearing the shirt.
Yeah.
Did not use the H word in any of the marketing.
But it's horror. Yeah.
No, not the marketing, but in the Pulitzer Prize winning, there was none. It was like a couple people were mad, but that's doesn't matter. We know.
We know. It's like, that to me is like, wow. Okay.
Also, I want to just say I looked up why other people were talking. The Good House was 2003 by Tananarive.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's hard to remember it was that long ago. And when you read it, and I want to say something too about what Ellen said. One of the other things I love about horror right now is that it does look back. So George, you were talking about like the folk horror that's been around forever and it's now like being delved into more and more and more. But even things like the Gothic, right? Telling the Gothic from, and it's not just Mexican Gothic, right? There's lots of books that do it, but that was the first one that made room for these other ones of taking the Gothic and telling it from a different version, not just the white British version. And then my favorite retellings are the Lovecraft ones. When people who Lovecraft would have hated take his stuff because it was great and tell their version of it, right? And I know Ellen was involved with the Ballad of Black Tom coming out, and that is the one that really set the bar for that. But it's just spectacular and amazing. I just read one that there'll be a starred review in the June issue of Library Journal that was, and Ellen, you might know it, A Plagued Sea by a Korean author. And it is a republished, it's a Nightfire title. And it was it's being translated here in America for the first time. Oh my gosh, Ellen, you got to check it out. It's older because it was
email me.
But oh my goodness, it was so true to Lovecraft, but completely Korean.
Which is awesome. Very cool. We I want to give you an opportunity to answer the thing that you missed, but the question was I don't even know what the question was. We all kind of agree that horror is having a boom right now. But can you think of like a moment in time where like the momentum started to change? Like, was there a thing that you noticed that you're like, oh, like when did horror seem like, oh, horror is big for you?
First of all, hi. Sorry, my computer was revolting. I would say I really started feeling like people were really started getting into horror, at least from like my perspective, what I saw. When Get Out came out, I think that was 2016. That was like the first time it was like, guys, horror? What? You got black people in it? It was like, wait, yes, we can. And that's cool. It's fun. I know that's actually like when more people started to look a little bit more at my like the short stories I was writing. But yeah, I would say it was Get Out, which I know is like a very like a deeply easy answer. Like, okay, all right, honey, okay. But,
that's valid though, and that's why I wanted to have like different perspectives because that's completely valid. Yeah. Building on that thought, and Ellen mentioned a moment that I think illustrates this, but like as horror is growing and becoming kind of more in the social awareness of everybody, are there kind of moments that you can point to that were like not inflection points, but like definitely significant moments? So Ellen, you mentioned Angel Down winning the Pulitzer Prize. That is a huge moment. One thing that comes to mind is 2018 when the movie adaptation of the book Bird Box came out, and there was like such a massive sensation around the film Bird Box, and like there was like the Bird Box challenge, and like I actually saw online, like on Instagram or something, there was like a flyer for like a nightclub in Atlanta that was having like Bird Box night. And so it went from a book that was sorry, Becky, you were gonna.
I was gonna say, well, I want to go back to the book even because when that book came out at my library, we went through everyone on staff read that book. And that was a moment when they weren't just the horror. I mean, they knew I was the horror person, but it wasn't just me. It was the people who worked in children's. It was the people in AV. It was the reference people. That book, I watched it go through my staff, which were a microcosm in age and reading tastes of the world. And it was just, it was fascinating to watch it happen.
Yeah. So, but what happens in those situations is that it causes like a current or something. It pulls people along with it, like something that is that massive, or a gravitational pull, or however you want to talk about it. But like something that's that big is gonna translate into people being at least more aware of horror. So like that moment is really big for me as being significant. And so the book is 2014 and it was a sensation. But then the movie came out and it just erupted. So can you think of, it doesn't have to be on that scale, but like other kind of examples of that? So like, I'm going to go to Jeremy first on this one.
Yeah. So also just to kind of echo things Becky and George have mentioned, Head Full of Ghosts did feel like the first time the kind of another cadre or generation of folks realized like maybe they're going to let us through the door. You know, when we were kind of doing our weird stuff in the underground, and they were like, "Oh, well, Paul had a shot here, and it blew up," and we were all like, "Go, Paul! Go, Paul! You can do this!" You know. And then it really did that felt like it started a current. You know, just a realization across folks where it was like, "Oh, maybe it's time to get this in front of the larger presses, right?" Because we were somewhat contentedly like just getting the work in front of pretty good readership. So. And then The Troop to me also was a moment because Craig Davidson had a pretty solid, what you would call a literary career, short stories, Iowa Writers Workshop, like all of that already. And then, he was like, well, I'm going to go do a collaboration with Ed Lee and then write a Parasite novel under a pseudonym. And that ended up being remains his most popular work. So that crossover, The Troop remains just one of those kind of fixtures in the horror scene, which is wonderful. And yeah, those were kind of moments where it felt like, okay, things are shifting forward, and the dominant kind of thing we've seen of mass market paperback horror is pivoting to this other entry point, and some new voices. And I think that just continued to extend and swirl outward. And then I remember I hadn't read Bird Box, and all of a sudden I saw a picture Josh posted of a pool at a Netflix party that had Bird Box written across the bottom. And I was like, they had to drain that pool to put the Bird Box logo in and refill it. I was like, they must really think this is something. And so I went out and bought the book the next day. So it was just that like, oh, okay, things are, so there are those moments where things cross over into the zeitgeist and you're like, okay, it does feel like there's momentum being gained, which is really cool. And then, the other thing, I love Get Out. That's definitely not solely generated. Nope is still my favorite Peele, but I have a deep love for Get Out. But that also felt like a new wave. It's the film and books correlating with Republican presidencies wave. So you look at like the OG 80s horror boom under Reagan. You look at, Get Out being at the advent of one of the original, Trump runs, and then what we're seeing now, which is a continuation of a boom. I just got a data analytics degree, and I will say these are corollaries. They're not causation, so let's put that out there. But they are strong corollaries if you look at what happens in the horror market under certain presidencies, because people need that out. People need metaphor and escapism and catharsis and a way to vent, and these things rise right to the surface. And now even more so, like in the way the work becomes so socially conscious, and the way that other voices are being allowed to be represented. Camino, another unique voice that came actually from, I have his first Bizarro book, Gutmouth, on the shelf behind me, and I'm just waiting for him to get famous enough to fully eBay that thing. But there's a lot of voices that started out very small and have become a big part of that. And I just, it all feels like continuous momentum to me. And all booms crash, but I think we've got another couple good years on us if the Republican corollary holds. So,
please.
Ellen, any moments like that come to mind for you?
Offhand, I'm not thinking of any, but I think they come from the films of the books. And I think there will be, Stephen Graham Jones has not had a movie made of any of his books. Right. If he does, when he does, hopefully it'll be really successful, and that will blow up everything and him. He's a bestseller in some markets, but not all over the place. He's not a household name. But I think if a movie of his did really well, I mean, Paul's Cabin at the End was I don't think it was considered a success as a movie.
Right.
I mean, money wise, I don't know,
It also wasn't good as a movie.
Oh, I'm like,
well, I don't think that helped his bestsellerdom. You know what I mean? And I think Whale Fall is being made into a movie, right? It should be released this year. I don't know how good it's going to be. That could blow, in addition to the Pulitzer, which is a whole different thing. It could blow him up into King territory. So, I really do think that it's tied to the movies, a lot of it, that kind of thing. I mean, that kind of major household name thing. But offhand, I can't think of other writings.
Well, so now Other Mommy, the Mallerman Incidents Around the House is coming out this year, and I'm really hopeful for that one. And Paul's got, what's Paul having made? A Head Full of Ghosts, right? That's
yes, and I look forward to that. I love that novel.
Yeah. So fingers crossed for both of those. George, what do you got for specific moments like that? Well, you kind of maybe already touched on some, but is there?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to list all of the above. A Head Full of Ghosts, Whale Fall. I think A Head Full of Ghosts as a film is actually going to kill me off because I think the book did. But anyway, I think The Lamb by Lucy Rose last year was a big one for me. My mum came. I walked into a room. She was reading it, and I was just kind of. And she hates horror. I was kind of like, "Are you okay?" And she's like, "Oh yeah." And I was like, "You made it past sentence 1, the fingers." She's like, "Oh yeah." So I don't know. I don't know what that's to do with. Maybe the literary kind of writing prose aspect of it, but that won so many awards over here in the UK. I mean, globally as well, but in the UK specifically, there were so many awards that book won. So that's a big one for me.
Yeah. Anything for you?
everyone's saying such great answers, and all I have is I think Sinners is gonna do a huge thing, guys, because winning an Oscar is crazy. Because the film industry does not like horror. So Sinners winning an Oscar and all the books that are coming out after it, I feel like there's gonna be I think maybe I'm at the start of a big thing because I feel like Sinners is definitely gonna invite more people like me to be wait, I have something to say. Specifically Southern Black people being I have something so cool to say, guys. You're not even gonna believe the folklore we got down here. Yeah, I think it's gonna be so fun. Guys, get into horror.
Sinners was fantastic and so deserving of
yes
all the awards it got and others that it didn't, if you ask me. Yeah.
It's perfect movie. I could be so annoying about it.
So yeah, but that wasn't the only horror presence at the Oscars either, right? I'm not as knowledgeable about film, but there was
Frankenstein.
Yeah, Frankenstein. Oh yeah, Weapons.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they all won something.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be a little bit of a corporate chill here and talk about the horror writers and StokerCon, since that's why we're here too. The fact that StokerCon went out on its own in 2016, right? The Stoker Awards used to be given at other conferences, as Ellen knows very well.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a huge risk to do it. And, I was very, very blessed to be a guest of honor in 2017. And that's where I met Stephen and became friends with him. And I met Tanara Reeve and became friends with her because we were all there together with other authors. And I met Rob there as well. So, but I will tell you from behind the scenes, the fact that we got to StokerCon 3 when we were in Providence, that was the StokerCon that meant the rest of the StokerCons could keep going. The first 2 years, it was hanging by the skin of the teeth, right? Barely making money. having George R.R. Martin there to draw people in so that we could sell tickets. And then, but only 3 years. That is a huge sign that there was a boom happening, right? Because a lot of conferences take way longer than 3 years. And by Providence, it was not just making money, it was breaking records every year and the number of people that it drew. Just the number of pitch sessions we're going to have this year. The number of publishers and editors it's pushing 20 at this point. We keep adding people. That is a sign as well, that I think we can't dismiss that, because that is the whole ecosystem, right? That's readers, that's publishers, that's editors, that's agents, that's writers, that's everyone, that's even fans in some cases. So I think that's a good sign.
And I guess zooming out on that thought a little bit, just the number of conferences or events that the glut. So like, and they're, being in the Midwest, I'm like, can we get some more in the Midwest? But like it seems like every week there's something going on the East Coast somewhere, like in Boston or New York or somewhere. So like the proliferation of just like things that people gather for, that seems to be within the last few years, and StokerCon being kind of like the, I would say, biggest when it comes to horror. Mm-hmm. Even just like the proliferation of more of those types of things, I think is a big deal too. Yeah. So final topic. And Ellen, I want to give you credit for deftly redirecting me on this one, because originally, and that's not sarcasm, I'm being completely genuine. My original question was like, where do you see horror going? But you kind of nudged me on that, and I realized that a better question would be either what would you like to see next in horror, or what is something that you feel like is missing right now? So what would you like to see going forward? What would be like welcome for you? Or is there something that you missed that you would kind of like to see more of, or to grow a little bit? So Jeremy.
Tough to be predictive about it, just because I want to be surprised. I mean, I think a lot of the voices that have crossed over recently are really exciting. And I work as an authors liaison at a film festival that's added writers into it recently, Telluride Horror Show. And we've had, Lansdale out and Kelly Link, because she definitely writes some horror, and Jones and Tremblay have become mainstays. But I'm also trying to really introduce this next generation, because there's voices like Rachel Harrison, even Adam's a little bit younger than me, but Adam Cesar. And then we've got a couple of guests coming out this year for the first time ever that I would qualify as like late millennial and Gen Z. And I'm super excited about that, because I want these voices, to be heard. And there's really people that have crossed over recently. I'm thinking of like CJ Lead and Eric LaRocca, and there's voices that are accelerating really fast and are young, exciting voices. So just seeing more of that and not knowing what to expect. But also I think Becky, said something earlier about, Korean Lovecraftian crossover too. So it's seeing the way all these cultures are merging, and the intersectionality of the way horror as a kind of genre and different voices are mixing together is, to me, the most exciting part. So I don't know what the next most exciting thing will be, but now I'm really stoked to read some Korean Lovecraft. So, things like that are what I hope just keep getting that sway and getting that reach. And I think you're always waiting for the next thrill, a little bit. You're waiting for that next voice that knocks you sideways. Like, remember as a kid, like, if you're on your king kick, and then, I saw a little quote that said, "This guy's better than me now," and it was on Books of Blood. And I was mad at Stephen King for saying it. I was like, "How dare you, sir? Like, there's nobody better than you." And then I read like the first 3 short stories, and they changed my life forever and ever. It was like In the Hills and Cities, and I was like, "Oh Lord, fiction can do this."
Okay.
So yeah, I'm always just waiting.
That
for
is literally my favorite one.
Oh, it's glorious. It's one of the most wonderful short stories I've ever read. So hard agree. Yeah. So yeah, I hope we just get to hear more new voices like that enter the marketplace, and
Awesome. Something that you would like to see more of, or maybe that you're missing that you want.
Everyone's gonna be so surprised at what I say. Oh my goodness. Um, I would just like to see obviously more Black voices represented because there's just like a specific kind of like I want to see more Black voices represented, voices of color in general. Some more trans women, some more lesbians, some more just like I want people on the margins because I feel like horror is a place for people on the margins. It's for people who have always been like, for like quote unquote crazy people, disabled people. There's like people who are just pushed out. Like, guys, let's come in. Let's write something spooky. Let's write something real. I'm really hoping for absolutely some more Korean Lovecraftian horror. Them Korean feminist writers get down. Japanese horror writers get down. And I would love more of it. Please translate more, please. I would just like obviously like more intersectionality and more like representation, but I just want more variety of stories. Like, guys, what are we all experiencing? What are we all seeing? What are we all feeling? Like, not even just to like have the representation, but just because it's like, guys, there's like so much different stuff happening around the world, so many different experiences and perspectives. And the more people are like, wait, this is a scary thing that happened to me here. This is a scary thing that happened to me here. I love it. I want it all. Also, if someone maybe wants to give me like lesbian, vampire, cannibalism, hit me up. I'm okay if I have to do it. That's okay. Like I'm hearing all y'all suggestions. I got y'all. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I got y'all. So I'm here.
Amazing. Ellen, any thoughts?
I want to see as many voices from different countries as possible
Mm-hmm.
in translation, because because we're ignorant Americans who can't speak other languages. At least most of us. I am, and there's more of that happening, and I really like that, and I want to see more of it. Not just Western countries, but also there's a lot of Asian horror coming in, Asian Americans, and just the different cultures. And that's what I am pleased to see more of, and I encourage that.
Yeah, absolutely. George.
Yeah, I definitely agree in terms of like horror from differing perspectives. I'm really excited for stuff like Dina Helm's one that is upcoming, which is a Palestinian horror. And then the other week I was reading The Hive by Ronald Malfi, and there was something about that just felt really sprawling and massive and 80s. And I'm really looking forward to more big books going forward because I enjoyed that very, very much. And then
It's so big.
it was massive, doorstop. Did immeasurable damage to my wrists, but more debuts in general going forward. I attended a book launch today with Amy Jane Stewart, who wrote Hex House, which is a great new one. And just more of the same, more horror in general. Stuff that allows us to do this kind of thing. Yeah.
Very cool. Becky.
Everyone said a lot of the things I would have said, but I'm going to say this because having gone on a book tour here in America for my book, Why I Love Horror, last fall, the number of people who came up to me and said to me, thank you for this book, because one, I felt seen, and two, I now have something to give to the people in my life who were like, why do you like that? Right? And so I heard that so much. So many people told me how much they felt seen. And to have that come out as mainstream and to have these mainstream authors talking about it. But the thing I want to see is if this truly is a boom, if we're truly going to a place where we also have talked about that it's becoming more mainstream, that there are billboards in Times Square, that there's so many books Ellen can't keep up, right? That there's so many voices, that we get that lesbian, vampire, cannibal book. I'm ready to read it. Yeah, write it. But I want us to get to a place where people don't have to give that book to someone to explain it, or don't have to explain why they like horror, who don't have to get the stuff I get, great. It's great that the Chicago Tribune made me Person of the Year to talk about Horror's Boom and to be the face of it for here in Chicago. But the number of people came up to me and were like, oh, I didn't even know that about you. Like, people don't know me in that world. You know, why do you like that? And what, that shouldn't happen anymore. That's how we know the boom is beyond boom and it just is. So I think that's what I'm hoping. And I think we're moving there. I've seen romance struggle worse than we have. And I've seen romance struggle and get to this point now where everybody's reading a romance and they're fine with it. And nobody asks you why you're reading it. You know, they just know. So I hope we get to where romance is. And it would make sense, right? Because we're both genres of the emotions. We're both about how people feel and making you feel something, which is a little squishy and you know, we're, you know, pun intended, and you know, touchy-feely, pun intended. But it is, we should be following with them. So that's what I hope. That's what I hope is coming.
Well, I love that. I'm glad. I really thought, Becky, that you were going to take mine. We
don't do mind reading yet, Rob. We know each other well, but we're not mind reading yet.
Like this close. But you did come close to it. And the thing that I want to see, which I have seen growing in recent years, and Becky, you're part of it, is nonfiction. So as a person who's a reader and not a writer, and who's always wanted to have a conversation about these things, it's become very important for me to, first of all, have people understand. And that's actually why this panel exists, because I was like, let's talk about what's going on here. But also, like, we have to take it seriously from like a historical perspective. Like, in addition to the books that we're consuming that we love and that, you know, give us that emotional reaction that we want, like, are people talking about the nuts and bolts of it, the historic, you know, significance of these things? And so, or just like making it easier for people to find horror. So like Sadie Hartman's books, where she does curated lists of things, and Emily Hughes with Horror for Weenies, and Becky, like you said, why I love horror, just giving people more of an understanding of what horror is for us. I think those kinds of things, there's more of a, or Josh Malerman's Watching Evil Dead, where it's just like more of like a thought on being a creative person and being excited about creativity. I think that I would love to see more nonfiction on the topic of what's going on, why it's great, who's doing significant things, even like tracing back those histories back to those like early 2000s books, or like, what is the difference between that boom and this boom? I'd love to see more nonfiction where people really get into like the what and the why of it. I think that would be really, and I can't tell you how happy I'm. Like, I read that book that was just looking at this series of Scream movies, and that was fantastic. And what seems like could just be like a franchise of films, when you look at the cultural significance of Scream, like how much of what Stephen Graham Jones does or talks about wouldn't exist if the Scream movies didn't exist. And so like those are significant and they do have an impact. And I think that nonfiction stuff, there's definitely room for it. And I want to see more of that. And I'll get off my soapbox now.
No, you're so right.
Yeah. I love those little like, and that's why I think interviewing people is so fantastic, because like, you know, you get to hear those like inspirations and like things that you might not connect one to one, but when you hear it, you're like, oh, that makes total sense. And now this thing has a different significance for me. So we are pretty much at our time. So I think I want to wrap it up, but I want to say great discussion. I'm so happy that we're in a boom. This conversation has made me feel so much more enthusiastic about getting through all of this stuff that's sitting behind me. And
I'm so jealous.
It's so true. Well, this is kind of like Ellen's response earlier. This is, you know, 15 years of.
Oh, this is work. Oh,
yeah, this is a slow accumulation.
Okay.
This isn't like a, yeah, but
okay. So I still have time. Okay, I'm just starting.
Well, yeah, and then my Yaya collection over time is going to get bigger and bigger. So, yeah. Thank you all
Guys,
for
stop.
joining for this panel. It was such a fabulous conversation, and I really appreciate all your voices. Any final thoughts anybody wants to say before we wrap this up?
It's been great. It's been fun.
Good.
I'm glad we were all
It
so
has.
positive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks
Hey,
again.
I'm also
And-
there's like
What's that?
I do want to say I think I'm the youngest here. I'm 27. Maybe me and George are the same age-ish, but I'm really honored to be invited into these little spaces and to like talk to people who are like much more cemented in the horror community.
We just don't.
Thank you for letting me in.
Thank
you for
I think that that's important though, right? I know having the range of experiences is how we know we're just covering a topic completely.
Yeah.
But also, like, if you are
Yes.
here having this conversation, you have a place here. You know, so imposter syndrome is not, allowed.
Yes.
Not allowed.
Yeah. If you're here, you have a place here.
Alright.
So.
And I will tell you, of all people, you think
I guess.
Ellen is the
Thank
one
you.
that has the least. She's going to tell you like it is. We're all here and we all belong. That's her whole mantra.
Everybody, thank you so much. It was
Period.
wonderful. I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate taking the time. Okay, again, that was the horror boom on the rise of horror popularity virtual panel that I did for StokerCon 2026. Really awesome discussion. Ellen Datlow, Becky Spradford, Jeremy Robert Johnson, Yaya Schofield, and George Dunn. Really grateful that they all gave me some time to talk about this fun and exciting topic. If you like this, StokerCon does virtual panels as part of their programming every year. So whether you choose to attend StokerCon or not, you do have the option to just pay for virtual only access and see pre-recorded panels, see live stream panels, see panels from previous years. It's a really great value. So if you're thinking about StokerCon next year and can't make it, virtual is an option. If you are going to StokerCon next year, virtual is an option. You can add that on and view it as it comes out, but also, in an encore the following weekend. So anyway, that's my little plug for StokerCon. The virtual panels this year were really powerful, really solid, and I hope that next year it gets even better. If you like what I'm doing, there's just so many ways that you can support me. So first of all, following me on social media. I am at The Arc Party, ARC, that The Arc Party, pretty much in anything. Following me on socials helps you see what episodes I've posted, what I might be working on in the future. I do tons of lists lately, so you can see what upcoming books are coming out by authors that me and my contemporaries are excited about. Also, you can leave me ratings on the podcast platform of your choice. So Apple Podcasts and Spotify are the two that are the most common. But wherever you're listening to podcasts, subscribe to me there. Leave a comment, leave a rating. That will just bring more attention to the podcast and hopefully get me more listeners. So you can do that. You can also go to the Linktree link in my social media bios. There's always a Linktree link there. I try to advertise the books that I'm talking about now there, or other things that I'm involved in. Tanana Reeve Dew had a little live stream that I was running background tech work for recently, and so I made sure that there was a link to that in there. But you can also get to my bookshop.org affiliate page. So I try to curate lists of books that I'm talking about on the podcast, or books by authors who have appeared on the podcast, so that it's easy to find their books and pre-order them or order older books as well. All of those things are great ways to support me. I am overjoyed by all of this amazing horror that's coming out and all the people who are excited about it. So please interact with me and keep coming back. I have monthly horror TBR episodes are going to be happening. I'm going to have great guests still to do interviews with. Like I recently had Paul Tremblay on, recently had Josh Malerman on. So keep coming back for those. And
yeah, it's a great year for horror, so let's just keep going. And until the next episode, always carry a book.